My name is Mark Davies. I'm 50 years old, and I've learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people destroy themselves. What I'm about to tell you happened at Dataflow Solutions, a mid-sized tech consulting firm in downtown Chicago, where I spent 14 years of my life building something I was genuinely proud of. I started there right after my divorce in 2009, when the economy was still recovering from the financial crisis. While other companies were laying people off, Dataflow was growing, and I saw an opportunity to rebuild not just my career, but my entire life. I worked my way up from senior analyst to team lead, then to operations manager. By 2023, I was overseeing a department of 12 people and managing client accounts worth over $3 million annually. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The thing about working somewhere for that long is that you become part of the furniture. You know every process, every system, every little quirk that makes the place run. I knew which clients paid late, which vendors offered the best deals, and exactly how our profit margins worked down to the last decimal point. More importantly, I knew people. I knew who you could trust and who you couldn't. I knew who cut corners and who went the extra mile. That knowledge would prove more valuable than I ever imagined. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in March 2023. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Janet from HR called me into her office. She looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as she delivered the news that would flip my world upside down. "Mark, I need to inform you that your position is being eliminated effective immediately. This is part of a company-wide restructuring initiative." I sat there for a moment, processing what she'd just said. 14 years of exemplary performance reviews, never missing a deadline, bringing in new clients, mentoring junior staff. None of it mattered. "What restructuring?" I asked. "I wasn't aware of any major changes planned for our department." Janet shuffled through some papers nervously. "Sophie Harrison, our new regional manager, felt that the department needed fresh leadership and a new direction. She'll be handling the transition personally." Sophie Harrison. I'd heard the name but hadn't met her yet. She'd been hired just 6 weeks earlier, supposedly some hotshot from a competitor in Minneapolis. Corporate had been singing her praises, talking about how she was going to revolutionize our operational efficiency. I should have paid more attention to those red flags. "And my replacement?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Ethan Carter will be taking over your responsibilities. He's been with the company for 3 years, and Sophie feels he's ready for expanded duties." Ethan Carter. 28 years old, decent enough guy, but hardly ready to manage a department handling millions in client revenue. He'd been working under me for 2 years, and while he was competent, he lacked the experience and institutional knowledge that took me over a decade to develop. The decision made no sense from a business perspective. I cleaned out my desk that afternoon, shaking hands with colleagues who seemed as shocked as I was. My assistant, Maria, actually started crying. "This is wrong, Mark," she whispered. "Everyone knows you're the backbone of this department." I thanked her for her loyalty, packed my personal items into a banker's box, and walked out of Dataflow Solutions for what I thought would be the last time. But as I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking lot, looking up at the building where I'd spent the better part of my adult life, something didn't feel right. The whole situation was too abrupt, too poorly explained. In my 14 years there, I'd never seen corporate make such a drastic personnel decision without extensive documentation and multiple meetings. There was more to this story, and I was going to find out what it was. That evening, I did what any rational person would do after losing their job. I opened a bottle of Jameson and started thinking. But instead of wallowing in self-pity, I found myself analyzing the situation like the data problems I'd been solving for years. Something about the timing, the explanations, and the personnel choices didn't add up. I spent the next few days networking, updating my LinkedIn profile, and putting out feelers for new opportunities. But I also started making some discreet inquiries. I called my friend Dave, who worked in accounting, and asked him to coffee. "Dave, level with me," I said, as we sat in our usual spot at Starbucks on Michigan Avenue. "What's the real story behind this restructuring?" Dave looked around nervously before leaning in. "Mark, there's no restructuring. Your department is the only one affected, and between you and me, the numbers don't justify it. Your team was hitting all their targets." That confirmed what I already suspected. I started reaching out to other contacts, carefully framing my questions as curiosity rather than investigation. What I discovered over the next 2 weeks painted a very interesting picture. Sophie Harrison hadn't just been hired 6 weeks ago. She'd been consulting with the company for 3 months before that, supposedly conducting an efficiency audit. During that time, she'd been spending a lot of time with Ethan Carter, who had been feeding her information about our department's operations. Several people had noticed them having lengthy lunch meetings at Romano's Italian restaurant, often lasting well past 2 hours. The most revealing conversation came from Lisa in IT. "Mark, I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said during a phone call. "But Sophie requested access to your email account and client files 2 weeks before you were terminated. She said she needed to review communication patterns for the audit." 2 weeks before. That meant the decision to fire me had been made long before Janet delivered the news. This wasn't about restructuring or fresh leadership. This was about removing an obstacle. I decided to take a different approach to my investigation. Using my background in data analysis, I started mapping out what I knew: Sophie and Ethan's relationship, the timing of her hiring, the access to my files, and most importantly, the financial implications of the changes they were making. My severance package included continuation of my company email access for 60 days, standard procedure for client transition purposes. What they didn't realize was that I still had administrative access to several shared drives and databases that I'd helped set up years earlier. Technically, I wasn't supposed to be accessing these systems, but technically, they hadn't revoked my permissions either. What I found in those files made my blood run cold. Sophie and Ethan had been systematically altering client billing records, inflating hours, and adding charges that didn't exist. They were skimming money from expense accounts and creating fake vendor invoices. The total amount was approaching $200,000 over just 3 months. But here's where it got really interesting. The fraudulent activities had started right around the time Sophie began her efficiency audit. She wasn't just stealing money. She was using her legitimate access to cover the tracks. And Ethan wasn't just her accomplice. He was her inside man, providing the detailed knowledge of our systems that she needed to pull this off. I printed everything: financial records, email exchanges, login timestamps, modified file histories. I organized it all into a comprehensive report, cross-referencing dates and amounts with surgical precision. My years of experience in data analysis had taught me that the truth always lives in the details, and these details told a story of systematic fraud. The personal relationship between Sophie and Ethan became obvious once I knew what to look for. Credit card records showed matching hotel stays in Milwaukee during a supposed client visit. Expense reports revealed romantic dinners charged to the company. Text message logs, accidentally included in email backups, contained explicit content that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. They thought they were smart. They thought that by removing me, they'd eliminated the one person who understood the financial systems well enough to catch them. What they didn't realize was that firing me had given me something more dangerous than access to their secrets. It had given me time and motivation to use that access properly. I sat in my home office, surrounded by printed evidence, and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them directly. I wasn't going to threaten or demand explanations. Instead, I was going to do something far more effective. I was going to let the system handle them exactly the way it was designed to. The next morning, I drove to the FedEx office on North Clark Street and sent a package to Robert Chen, the Chief Executive Officer of Dataflow Solutions' parent company, Meridian Technologies, based in Dallas. The package contained copies of every document I'd gathered, organized into a professional report with clear timelines and financial summaries. I included a cover letter that was brief and to the point. "Mr. Chen, I believe you need to see this information regarding irregularities in your Chicago office operations. As a former employee, I felt obligated to bring these concerns to your attention. I didn't mention my termination. I didn't ask for my job back. I simply presented the facts and let them speak for themselves. Then I did the hardest thing of all. I waited. 3 weeks passed without any apparent changes at Dataflow. I kept in touch with former colleagues, and from what I could gather, Sophie and Ethan were still operating normally. I began to wonder if my package had even reached the right person, or if corporate had simply filed it away as the complaints of a disgruntled former employee. Then Maria called me on a Thursday afternoon. "Mark, something weird is happening here," she said quietly. "There's been a team from Dallas in the office for 2 days. They're calling it a routine operational review, but they've been going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. They've been interviewing people, reviewing files, checking computer logs. Sophie looks like she's about to have a nervous breakdown." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Interesting, how's Ethan handling it?" "He's been making excuses to leave early every day. Yesterday he claimed he had a dentist appointment, but I saw him at the bar across the street at 3 in the afternoon, drinking alone. The pressure was building, and they could feel it. But the beautiful thing was that they had no idea where it was coming from. As far as they knew, I was just another laid-off employee, probably struggling to find new work in a competitive market." Over the next 2 weeks, the situation at Dataflow became increasingly chaotic. Dave from accounting told me that the Dallas team had frozen several expense accounts pending further review. Lisa from IT mentioned that they'd brought in forensic computer specialists to examine the servers. Most tellingly, Sophie had started staying late every night, apparently trying to access systems and modify records. But here's the thing about digital forensics. Once the professionals are involved, trying to cover your tracks only makes things worse. Every login, every file modification, every deleted email leaves a trail. Sophie and Ethan were essentially creating new evidence of their guilt with every desperate attempt to hide the original crimes. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in May. I was having lunch at Portillo's when my phone rang. It was Janet from HR. "Mark, I know this might sound strange, but Mr. Chen from Dallas would like to speak with you. Are you available for a meeting tomorrow?" I agreed, of course. The next day, I put on my best suit and drove to Dataflow's offices for the first time since my termination. The building looked the same, but the atmosphere was completely different. Employees were walking around like they were attending a funeral, speaking in hushed tones and avoiding eye contact. Robert Chen was exactly what I expected. A sharp-dressed man in his 50s with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd built his career on results. He met me in the main conference room, accompanied by 2 other executives I didn't recognize. "Mr. Davies," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming in. I want to discuss the information you provided us regarding irregularities in this office's operations." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm happy to help however I can. The investigation you prompted has revealed significant financial discrepancies totaling over $300,000. We've also uncovered evidence of systematic fraud, falsified records, and breach of fiduciary duty. The scope of the problem extends beyond what you initially documented. $300,000. Even I had underestimated the extent of their theft." Mr. Chen continued. "What's particularly troubling is that these activities appear to have been orchestrated by senior management specifically to bypass our normal oversight procedures. Your termination, it seems, was designed to remove the one person most likely to notice these irregularities." I nodded slowly. I had wondered about the timing. "Mr. Davies, I want to offer you a position as an independent consultant to help us clean up this mess. We need someone who understands the systems, the processes, and the people involved. Your compensation would be significantly higher than your previous salary, and you'd have direct authority to implement whatever changes you deem necessary." I pretended to consider the offer for a moment before accepting. In reality, I'd been hoping for exactly this outcome from the moment I sent that first package to Dallas. My first day back at Dataflow Solutions was a Monday morning in June. I arrived at 8:30 sharp, carrying a briefcase full of documentation, and wearing the same confident expression I'd maintained throughout this entire ordeal. The receptionist, Karen, looked shocked to see me. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "I'm back," I said simply. "Different capacity, same building." Mr. Chen had arranged for me to have an office on the executive floor, complete with full access to all systems and databases. My official title was Operations Restructuring Consultant, but everyone understood what that really meant. I was there to clean house, and I had the authority to do whatever was necessary. The first person I encountered was Maria, who nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me walking down the hallway. "Mark, I can't believe you're back. People are saying you're working directly for Dallas now." "Something like that," I replied. "How have things been around here?" "Tense. Really tense. Sophie's been in meetings with lawyers for the past week, and Ethan hasn't been seen since Friday. Word is that HR is conducting formal interviews with everyone who had access to the financial systems." I nodded and continued to my new office. From my window, I could see the parking lot where I'd sat in my Honda Civic just 3 months earlier, feeling betrayed and confused. The view was the same, but everything else had changed. At 10 o'clock, I had my first official meeting with Sophie Harrison. She walked into my office looking like she hadn't slept in days, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of stress. Dark circles under her eyes, wrinkled blouse, hands that trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. "Mark," she said, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I'm sure you're wondering why certain personnel decisions were made. I want you to know that nothing was personal. It was purely a business decision based on operational efficiency." I leaned back in my chair and looked at her for a long moment. "Sophie, I think we both know that's not true." Her composure cracked slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean the $300,000 in fraudulent charges. I mean the fake vendor invoices. I mean the systematic manipulation of client billing records. I mean your relationship with Ethan Carter and how you used my termination to cover your tracks." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Credit card records showing joint hotel stays in Milwaukee, email exchanges discussing how to modify expense reports, login timestamps proving you accessed my files weeks before my termination, bank deposits that don't match any legitimate company transactions. Sophie stared at the documents like they were a death sentence. How did I what? How did I figure out that you were stealing from the company? How did I discover that you fired me to eliminate the one person who knew the systems well enough to catch you?" I closed the folder and looked at her directly. "Sophie, I spent 14 years learning every detail of how this place operates. You spent 6 weeks thinking you could outsmart that knowledge." She stood up abruptly. "I need to speak with my attorney." "That's probably a good idea," I said calmly. "HR will be in touch about your final interview." Sophie left my office without another word. I never saw her again. According to Janet, she submitted her resignation that afternoon, effective immediately. The legal department informed me later that she'd agreed to full restitution and signed a non-disclosure agreement to avoid criminal prosecution. Ethan's departure was even more dramatic. He simply stopped showing up for work. His desk remained untouched for a week before maintenance cleared it out. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved back to his hometown in Indiana, taking a job at his father's insurance agency for a fraction of his former salary. Over the next 6 months, I systematically rebuilt the department I'd helped create. I implemented new oversight procedures, hired qualified replacements, and established protocols to prevent the kind of fraud Sophie and Ethan had perpetrated. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd fired me to eliminate oversight, and now I was back with more authority to oversee than I'd ever had before. My consulting contract was eventually extended for 2 years, with an option for permanent employment. I chose to stay independent, enjoying the flexibility and the significantly higher compensation. More importantly, I'd learned something valuable about patience and strategic thinking. The truth is, I could have confronted Sophie and Ethan directly when I first discovered their fraud. I could have demanded explanations, threatened to expose them, or tried to negotiate my way back into the company. Instead, I chose to let the system work the way it was designed to work. I presented facts to the appropriate authorities and allowed them to reach their own conclusions. That's the thing about revenge. The most satisfying kind doesn't require you to destroy your enemies. It simply requires you to step back and let them destroy themselves. Sophie and Ethan had created their own downfall the moment they decided to steal from the company. All I did was make sure the right people knew about it. Today, I'm still working as an independent consultant, helping companies identify and prevent the kind of internal fraud that cost Dataflow Solutions so much money and credibility. It's satisfying work, and it pays well. But more than that, it's a reminder that experience and integrity are more valuable than any quick scheme or shortcut. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.